to humiliate, demean, and punish. Armies that would defeat other forces would not uncommonly rape the defeated members of his army. The Sodom story is not about license or promiscuity or even perversity. Sodom, according to the rabbis, is about cruelty. It's about inhospitality.
And so the angels strike the men with blindness and then usher the family out to safety.
It's not about homosexuality. The city was doomed to destruction before the strangers arrived at the door. There has been 500 years of reputable critical scholarship in the English language on these texts. This is not something that somebody's just come up with in the last 3 or 4 years, apologists for a, quote, liberal reading of Scripture.
I know a lot of towns that are like Sodom and Gomorrah, that you can walk into these towns and they don't show any sign of hospitality simply because you're black or simply because you're gay or lesbian or just because you're an outsider. We have many towns here in New England that are like that. That's the sin of Sodom and Gomorrah. And when I walk through those towns because I'm a black woman or a lesbian woman, that's when I think of Sodom and Gomorrah.
I really do think that Sodom and Gomorrah is about homosexuality. A lot of people today want to say it was really about hospitality. But if all we have is the Sodom and Gomorrah story, there's not a lot in the Old Testament that settles the question. We have to turn to the New Testament. The one that's very clear is Romans 1, the first chapter of the Epistle to the Romans.
In the first chapter of Romans, the Apostle Paul writes these words, God gave them over to shameful lusts, even their women exchanged natural relations for unnatural ones. In the same way, the men also abandoned natural relationships with women and were inflamed with lust for one another.
It seems to me the clear meaning of that is that whatever the other stuff in the Old Testament, one thing that carries over as an enduring thing is that God disapproves of same-sex genital intimacy. He does not want men lying with men and women lying with women, denying the natural use.
When Paul uses the term natural or unnatural, he's really meaning what is customary or uncustomary. It wasn't customary for men to have sex with men in the Jewish context, but he saw it in the Greek world. And so he saw that as evidence of worshiping the wrong God, of idolatry.
His reference, of course, is to exploitive same-sex relationships among pagan Romans and Greeks. Paul certainly never contemplated the kind of monogamous, long-term relationships that are very much normal among homosexual people today.
The Bible really doesn't deal with homosexuality because it has no concept of it. There were no Greek words, no Aramaic words, no Hebrew words for these concepts of human sexuality. And therefore, the few references that have been lifted out of the Bible to be used in religious teachings to condemn homosexuality really are inappropriate.
The one thing I said was, I can't do this to my dad. What his family is like was such an important part of his political life. And I knew that being gay, being a lesbian, does not fit into the perfect political family. We have to fit the cookie cutter mold of the wedding dress and the man and the woman and have children and get married. And I just remember thinking, it's not even an option. People say, why didn't you come out earlier? If something's not an option, you don't consider it. I said, I'm just going to make this go away. I came up with all these different excuses. It got to the point where I was so unhappy. I had sort of a moment where I was like, if I want to be happy, it's going to mean losing my family. And that was the decision I had to make.
I remember a phone call that Chrissy made to me saying that she did want to meet with us and sit down and talk with both of us about this.
I met up at the restaurant and my mother said, I think I know what this is about. I think that you and your husband, you and Mark, are having problems, and I think that you're going to tell us that you're gay.
I did have an inkling at that point. I knew that she had met this young woman and had strong feelings for her.
She said, there's something different about you when you're with her. You come to life. I said, you're right, that's what I was coming here to tell you. And my dad was bawling. He proceeded to tell me how a parent will do anything to protect their child and that it's an unconditional love.
Unconditional love, which is what I believe we have for our children, means exactly that. There are no conditions.
And he was all emotional, and he said, I love you no matter what, and Mom and I will be here for you no matter what. I mean, just hearing the words, "we'll always love you," was the most amazing thing to hear, because I think that's what every child's fear is, that your parents will disown you. I mean, it's a real fear. I mean, a lot of people, it happens to them.
It's tough, but they just have to feel their heart, and they have to feel that their child has to have their love, especially at this moment, which is really hard for them because people are discriminated against. People are killed because they're homosexuals, beaten. I mean, as I walked out of the restaurant, the one worry I had was that Chrissy was going to face horrible discrimination now. That just meant we had to dig in harder and help more so that she could get through all that.
We spent a whole year basically living in the closet as a family. And so then we turned to my cousin, who was a pastor. And his reaction was, "Don't worry, Rondi, Jake can change." And he set us up with a Christian counselor. And she told us that we shouldn't really accept Jake as a gay person because then he won't try to change.
She was initially told by pastors that I could change. I remember one day she brought me the Mayo Health book. It talked about homosexuality and how for some people they can have phases in their life where they have same-sex attractions and it doesn't necessarily mean they're gay. And she said, "Jake, could that possibly be the case with you?"
They thought that maybe he thought he was gay but wasn't actually gay, which I obviously disagreed with because seeing the pain that he had gone through in the year before. I mean, if he wasn't gay, there would be no reason to endure that.
This is Focus on the Family with psychologist and author Dr. James Dobson.
Now, today we want to talk about the prevention and treatment of homosexuality in boys.
Focus on the Family is probably one of the most powerful Christian organizations in this country, led by Dr. James Dobson, one of the most well-respected authors and radio commentators, reaching nearly 200 million people worldwide.
Parents fear that their sons and daughters will become gay or lesbian.
James Dobson got his beginnings by basically talking about parenting. He has no theological training whatsoever, but he claims on the airwaves to be the lone interpreter of what is God's will for everyday families in America.
Homosexuality is condemned.
So while he talks about raising children, he also talks about the destruction of the family by gays and lesbians.
If the definition of marriage should change, the family as we know it will die, and with it will go everything else that sits on that foundation.
He's even gone so extreme as to say that gays are comparable to Nazis and how they will destroy the Christian foundation of this country.
Dr. Dobson and Focus on the Family have a program they call Love One Out. And they also call it reparative therapy. They say their aim is to prevent or to treat, to change homosexuality.
Homosexuality is a preventable disorder, and I still see it as a disorder.
I have to tell you that as a psychologist, the idea that homosexuality is a preventable disorder is completely misguided. There's no scientific research to back it up. It's not a disorder any more than heterosexuality is a disorder. Dr. Dobson tells parents that if your child tells you he or she is gay or lesbian, then you should not say, well, that's okay, you should not try to accept them, but you should try to get them changed. That is exactly the opposite of what you should do. It's the way to devastate your child. It's not something that can be changed at will because it's inborn, it's natural. And to call it reparative is a misnomer because there's nothing to repair.
The truth of the matter is there are tens of thousands of people who have come out of homosexuality.
religious conservatives will